So yeah, so the Camino Real, as it's constituted, is a sort of fictional memory, and it glosses over the brutality of the mission system. I mean, it was really a forced labor system, and it was, you know, like, it differed from chattel slavery in the eastern U.S. Only in detail. You know, like the casualties are extraordinary, and you know, like the 54% of people, you know, survived missionization. So it was not a good thing for a lot of native groups. You know.
Yet one never hears about it.
One never hears about it because people choose to remember a past California that's, you know, rosy. This place, Mission San Miguel, was founded in 1797 because there was a very large Salinan native village here called Vaca. This is the most intact mission building in all of Alta California. This current structure dates back to around 1816. This cemetery, the first Salinan neophyte was buried here in 1798. 2,249 native people are buried in this cemetery, speaking to not only the disease load that the mission system placed on native people, but also to the brutality of that system. Behind me is the mission church of San Luis Obispo, founded by Junipero Serra, the famous Franciscan friar who is credited with the founding of the state of California. The reason why this mission was established was a nearby mission on the coast was short of food, and there was a large and friendly Chumash population here. And these Chumash people took sort of a great risk by welcoming in the Franciscan friars and allowing them to build a mission in this place. And that was because they angered other native groups surrounding them who weren't in favor of the Spanish colonial mission. And as a result, the first mission built here was burned down by neighboring tribes. So the Franciscan friars taught the local Chumash how to build with adobe construction, and this current structure was established after that. And the kinds of architecture that the Chumash were used to was quite different from this. We have from the Portola expedition of 1769, the Franciscan friar Juan Crespi's diary, and he wrote in August of 1769, he described the kinds of structures that the Chumash were living in. And after traveling about 2 hours and a half, we arrived at the shore where we saw a regular town, the most populous and best laid out of all that we had seen on the journey up to the present time. We counted about 30 large and spacious houses of a spherical form, well constructed and roofed with grass. According to the number of people whom we saw and who came down to the camp, there were not less than 400 souls. We noticed that they have two very neat enclosures. They say that one of them is for games and that the other is their ceremonial temple. They have surprising skills and ability in the construction of their canoes, which are made of good pine planks, well joined and of a graceful shape with two prows. So long before the Franciscan friars encountered the Chumash, they had their own style of architecture, their own way of living on the landscape, their own seafaring technologies. And additionally, they had their own temples and mortuary customs. We are at Mission San Gabriel outside of Los Angeles. This was the fourth mission established in Alta California, initially in 1771. The original mission was destroyed and reestablished at this location in 1776. The mission was established for the Tongva people who lived in the Los Angeles area. This entire elaborate structure was built by those people, including aqueducts, a mill, as well as a factory for making candles to supply the other missions of the California system. The mission didn't last very long. Like many missions, it was secularized in 1834 by the Mexican government. When that happened, inventories of the mission showed that there were 1,323 Tongva people still living at the mission. This cemetery contains the remains of 6,000 Tongva people who died working here from various diseases and possibly overwork from 1771 until 1834. And so this plant, whose Latin name I cannot say, Chlorogonum something, is called the soaproot plant. And the reason I wanted to come out here and talk about the soaproot plant is this was a sort of major food source for people in California. The fibers on the outside of this plant were used by native peoples to make brushes. So you can dry this out, bind it together, and make a brush. And the root on the inside is it's toxic unless it's been cooked. Like the Chumash would pit roast this by essentially digging a hole, starting a big fire, throwing a bunch of rocks on the fire until they're red hot, and then throw a bunch of these guys on some like wet grass and bury it and sort of let it steam for a good 24 hours. And what that does is breaks down the toxins inside. So if you leave it raw, this can be used as a fish poison, which is an illegal practice now, but it was something people used to do. But if you cook it long enough, it becomes edible and sweet. And this was referred to in a lot of the chronicles of people like Juan Crespi, who chronicled the Portola expedition into California in 1769. And so this is like a staple food, and people are making tamales out of it. It's sort of a well-known food to the Spanish explorers. And it's sort of maintained like a lot of indigenous crops in this way that people wouldn't recognize as agriculture necessarily. You know, the introduction of the agricultural practices of the Spanish, they're radically different from what people were doing previous to that, but people were able to maintain these really large populations. Those same chroniclers talk about these big towns on the coast near San Luis Obispo, big towns near Malibu. You know, people are relying on fish, but you know, plants like this were giving them starches. They were relying on those sorts of things. They were harvesting shellfish and then processing the shells into beads that were getting traded really far inland. And so people like the Navajo were trading in Chumash beads, coming from their fishery. So you had a really sophisticated system of land management to ensure resources like this, to ensure animal resources like rabbits, and to ensure fishery resources as well. And so like the Spanish show up and all they see are people setting things on fire, and they suppress it.
Now this whole valley at one time was really loaded with Indian people. All through the valley floor there were sites, but through the construction and the wanton desecration of these sites, you can't find them anymore. The Spaniards took them into the mission system. Whether they liked it or not, they still took them into the mission system. And in most cases, they enslaved them to build the missions.
And so the very act of removing everybody, the reducciones they did, where they like took all these little villages and forced them to come live near the missions so they could, you know, press them into labor, constructing buildings and such, you know, caused the landscape to change because those people aren't out there doing those things anymore.